What's going on, everyone? So today we are diving into some rares and going over the best of them in Star Wars Unlimited. Honestly, this is a rarity that I think really starts to get very difficult in what you determine the top 10 are. When you just talk about uncommons, there's a lot of very clear ones, and I know someone's going to mention in the comment section that I missed Overwhelming Barrage in my original video. And yes, I did. And yes, that was incorrect. But when you talk about legendaries and you talk about uncommons, there are a lot of like very clear winners. Same with commons, to be honest. For me, at least, when you go into the rares, there are a couple of really good ones. Like I'd say 5 out of the top 10 list. I'm like, yep, that's got to be on the list. The rest of them are, well, pretty close to a lot of other rares. And to be honest, there's not really like that many standout rares. Most of them kind of make up just the solid core of your deck. And to be honest, that's oftentimes just good enough. With that said, a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. We are getting ready for a tournament we're going to be hosting this weekend, which is going to be a ton of fun. And I'm excited to dive into some cards today. Let's talk about our first one. For the first one on the list, we've got Sabine's Masterpiece. This was definitely one when it originally came out that I was hopeful for, but I wasn't sure if it was really going to make its mark. This is a 3-cost space unit in Heroism, a 3/3 when you attack. If you control an aspect, it each does different things. Vigilance, heal 2 from a base. Command, give an experience token. Aggression, deal 1 damage to a unit or base. And then Cunning, exhaust, or ready a resource. So when this came out, this was JTL, and really it was, is it good enough to be playing and ECLing out in Sabine? And guess what? It is definitely good enough. This is one of the stronger rares. Of course, ECL does make it an absolute powerhouse in a lot of situations, but oftentimes playing it, your opponent kind of has to immediately deal with it. There are really a couple different variations that I've seen. Most commonly, though, the command part of this really is what makes it super powerful. Once you get the command part on the Sabine's Masterpiece, you can start putting those experience tokens on, start value trading, and then continue to build out your board so you can start getting the other effects with it. Vigilance is also really good. It's restore 2, but aggression, dealing the 1 damage to random units, can also do some massive DPS just to knock out units and deal more damage to the base. But Cunning is the one part of this that I've really not seen all that often. Perhaps it's just the aspect combinations that this card works with generally, as it is a Spectre. You're going to be seeing it in all those specific strategies, but honestly, the more relevant tag that we've seen most often is the Rebel tag. And that's really what makes Sabine's Masterpiece super consistently powerful. If it was just for ECL, I could see it being solid in certain decks. If it was just Rebel, I could see it being good in certain decks, but the combination of the two, having a very powerful ECL explosion turn where you can ECL early on in the game and start becoming that really scary player, and also just playing it and being able to work with things like Fleet Lieutenant, Wing Leader, or Rebel Assault that are very common in a lot of situations, or just playing it and being able to utilize a bunch of different value triggers. That's all you really need from Sabine's Masterpiece. This has been significantly better than originally thought, and it is just a unit that has a big target on its back as soon as you play it. Next up, we've got Dr. Pershing. This 2-cost ground unit in Vigilance Villainy. It's a 0/5 with an action to deal 1 damage to a friendly unit to draw a card. This one was very interesting, especially when it got released. Similar to, a couple of other cards that we're going to talk about here. Wasn't really quite sure if it was going to make its mark. And realistically, in the earlier stages of the game, yes, people were playing it in some of the more controlling decks, like Bosk Blue back in set 2 as a great example, or even like Vader Blue when that deck still existed. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, they have a Pershing, the game is over. It was more like, okay, they have a Pershing. In most cases, I could kind of ignore this, or I could just, kind of hit their base. And at least they have a unit to kill off my Boba Fett so that I could ready up some more resources, right? And take advantage of my ambushers. But as the game started to progress more and more, especially as of the last set and this set, this card has gotten so much better. A lot of the games have come down to this card advantage engine, being able to have a ton of different options available to you and being able to leverage those cards in the late game. Think of, all the different cards that have been absolutely amazing, like Kiadi Mundi now as a great example, that are really pushing some of the more mid-range decks into that sort of soft control role, because they have so many cards and controlling elements to deal with units that those extra cards really do come in handy. And of course, if you are playing things like Kylo Data Vault or Kira Data Vault or Iden Data Vault, the Data Vault portion of it allows you to have that extra HP, and the Pershing with Data Vault allows you to draw into more and more cards. And honestly, 60 cards is actually something that in some cases provides more consistency to your deck, because you just have so many repeating options. And especially with Pershing and a few other cards, you're able to really consistently get to the cards that you want. And this has just been an amazing one, especially as of the last couple of sets. Maul's the next one on our list, and this is a 7-cost ground unit in command villainy. It's a 7/6 with ambush and overwhelm. It's also got an on-attack trigger to make it so that another friendly underworld unit will receive all damage that Maul would have received. So you could basically kind of protect Maul by, sacrificing another underworld unit, which is kind of a fun mechanic, not as relevant. Really, just the power of him being a 7/6 ambush overwhelm for 7 is really why Maul is good, which is kind of surprising, because it just goes to show you, like, 7 resource 7/6 isn't like necessarily an amazing stat line. Like, it's, oh my gosh, this is insane. We've had 6 resource 7/6s in the game. It's ambush. Ambush is just an incredibly disgusting mechanic. When you pair that with overwhelm, you now have a unit that could come down, immediately impact the board, and put on pressure to your opponent. So what happens with Maul is you get this kind of duality of it. You have the option to become more of a, kind of just, this is my mid-game / end-game finishers, where I am playing out my units, getting in aggressively. If you're trying to use units to defend, I now have this immediate impact on the board that can also hit your base, similar to like ECL Wrecker, which is why ECL Wrecker was so scary as well, was the ambush overwhelm portion of it, plus the damage that you get to deal with Wrecker. But in Maul's case, you just play it and you're able to get the effect from him. And on top of that, you could also be playing this in a more controlling deck where you're just getting a kind of removal option, right? It's just a 7 resource, kill your ground unit, leave behind this unit that's also a threat that could also end the game and could also potentially threaten your other units. This guy is quite solid. The next one up is my pick for the strongest rare in the entire game, and that is Hotshot DL44 Blaster. Honestly, I don't really think that this one is particularly close either. I think this is like by far one of the strongest rares in the game. This is a 1-cost upgrade in aggression, but to be honest, it's not an aggression card. It's a cunning card, because you have smuggle for 3 in the cunning aspect. And when you play it using smuggle, you get to attack with the attached unit, and it gets +2/+0. So you essentially get this sort of like worse surprise strike, right? And instead of being a 2 resource +3/+0 that attacks immediately, you get a 3 resource +2/+0. It is an upgrade, so it lasts forever. But the key part about this is that it's in your resource pile. Smuggle turns out to be a very, very powerful mechanic, and you'll have a couple of those type of cards on this list in of itself. But Smuggle has just become more and more valuable as we've gotten into the recent sets, as we've gotten into, mid-range, more controlling matchups where the games aren't just ending on like turn 4s and 5s as they used to. Having a little bit of play, as I said, with drawing cards, but in this case you're drawing cards from a resource pile, has been incredibly important. And Hotshot Blaster is not only just a powerful finisher, but you could also just have it be attached to some smaller units, making them permanent threats that you must deal with, while also getting in immediate damage. So it's not only a finisher, it's not only kind of a value play, it is also kind of something that can just pump in way more damage than anyone is used to. This card is incredible. And honestly, I'm going to miss when Smuggle is rotated out of the format, because I've always enjoyed, having multiple ways to dispatch your cards. So Hotshot Blaster, definitely my pick for the best rare here. Next one on the list is K2SO. Talk about a card that has stood the test of time. This one was a little bit close. Honestly, this one, as part of the top 10, is one of those borderline ones that I think you could argue a lot of other rares, but it's not like this is a weak card by any means. If you are playing an aggressive heroism deck, this card is absolutely incredible. 4-cost ground unit in aggression heroism, 4/4 with overwhelm, and when defeated, each opponent has to choose whether to deal 3 damage to their base or to discard a card. Well, I should say you choose one for your opponent. This is also a card with the Rebel tag. Rebel tag is still very, very powerful. And this card has gotten a little bit less in popularity because there are some other kind of strategies in these games, but it is still an incredibly powerful card and one of the rare occurrences where you can guarantee damage into your opponent's base by doing direct damage. Now, I guess I should say guarantee now, since when defeated isn't necessarily to pop off, but it is close to guaranteed 3 damage into your opponent's base, and that is what makes him so powerful. You get this threat that your opponent kind of has to deal with, but they were probably going to deal with any unit that you played anyways in a deck that's playing this, and so having a unit that gets you value when it immediately dies is something that's really, really good. This is nostalgic for me. I think I have like 10 copies of K2SO. I have a million set 1 cards. It is one of the few sets that I have like a ton of cards for because I played so much paper Star Wars Limited at that time, and K2SO is probably the card I have the most in terms of rares, legendaries. Next one is Yaddle, and this is the first one from the brand new Legends of the Force set. And this one's kind of interesting. I'm going to cheat a little bit and share the spotlight with Adi Gallia as well. I think Yaddle's just a little bit stronger than her, mainly because I think the Restore 1 is a little bit more relevant than the 1 damage from events in most of the decks that are looking to play these types of cards. But this 2-cost ground unit in Vigilance Heroism, 2/4 with Restore 1, and the Force Jedi Republic tag is really just that good because of the Force tag. You get a body that's a 2/4, which is very likely to survive. Honestly, when I was looking at previous cards, like before set 5 really, when you saw a 2/4, you're like, ooh, dang, that's pretty good. And now it's kind of just the standard. You either play a 3/3 or a 2/4. Back before this set, most of the time it was like 3/3s were excellent, 2/4s were pretty rare. And then otherwise you were playing like a 3/2 or a 2/3. So the fact that these were both 2/4s just made it a little bit more obnoxious, and having the Force tag to set up all your Force synergies in those decks is critical. Like I've said many, many times, the cheaper cost card you are, the more easy it is to be an absolute staple just because of people wanting really, really solid plays in those first couple of turns. Basically, every deck is looking for 12 or so turn 1 plays, and Yaddle just fits in that slot absolutely amazingly. And same with Adi Gallia. The Force tag is what makes these cards truly great. We've got a Legion General Pryde next up, and this is one that I wasn't quite sure was ever going to really see the light of day. 2-cost ground unit in aggression villainy, 2/3 first order official. When indirect damage is dealt to a unit, you can defeat a non-unique upgrade on it, and on attack, if you have the initiative, deal 2 indirect damage to a player. So first off, 2 resource, 2/3. Like I said, this is the stat line that we were kind of expecting. Nothing too special about it. It's really the if you have the initiative, deal 2 damage to indirect damage to a player is what's scary about it. That on attack trigger can be devastating. It could be like turn 1 play, attack for 4 on turn 2. And more importantly, the reason why this guy's on the list now is because it is one of those cards that is absolutely devastating in the Boba Data Vault deck, because this card now allows you to trigger Boba Fett's effect, meaning that essentially if you have the initiative and your opponent just doesn't take any damage to their units, which they're unlikely to do so because of all the daring raids and open fires and all that stuff to deal with your units that deck has, you're getting hit for 5 on turn 2. Like, they attack and they deal 2 indirect damage to your base, and then you get hit by another one from Boba Fett's action. Like, oh my gosh, this card can do some massive damage. It's also just kind of obnoxious with that indirect damage defeating non-unique upgrades. This does come into play a lot, being able to defeat shield tokens, because remember, the indirect damage goes through shield tokens. Defeating experience tokens is very, very common. Of course, and if you're lucky, you can hit big upgrades, that aren't really something that happens a crazy amount of time, but like Fallen Lightsaber, Jedi Lightsaber, that type of stuff, it does happen, and it is brutal. This card just, it starts early, again, 2 resources, and it goes the distance. This next card, I think, just goes to show you how truly powerful and wanted Smuggle actually is. 4-cost ground unit, Lom Pyke in Vigilance Villainy. It's a 4/6 with an on-attack trigger that you can give a shield token to an enemy unit, and if you do, you give a shield token to a friendly unit, and it's got Smuggle for 5 resources, same aspect. So first off, a 4-resource ground unit with a 4/6 stat line is actually above average. That is solid. The on-attack trigger is also really annoying. Depending on your board state, this can really disrupt your opponent's game plan. But realistically, the reason why this guy is so powerful and so played is it has Smuggle. That's it. But there are so many decks. Think of like Kylo Ren Tarkin Town, or like Kira Data Vault, or in some cases Iden Data Vault, or Kylo Data Vault, where your opponent's just playing like 1 to 2 copies of this in their deck. Why? Not because they want to curve out with Lom Pyke and try to set up like the Vader ECL synergies or anything like that, which are cool, by the way. It's more because you can just kind of resource this and play it for 1 resource extra, which isn't that big of a deal, because the way controlling decks work is they usually have a lot of 4 resource removal. And so, you know, if you were to play a 4 resource removal on the 5 resource turn anyways, you may as well like, okay, I'm going to play Lom Pyke instead of that, and it's not really going to cost me any additional resources. Instead, it's just going to basically let me draw a card. That's kind of the strength of Lom Pyke. Smuggle actually ends up being just an incredible mechanic when you're in a format that's more built on value and getting later and later into the game, and kind of going for your game plan, but in the 7th, 8th, 9th turns of the game. Lom Pyke is just really, really solid. Again, nothing too special about this guy. I do think his on-attack trigger can, like I said, be extremely annoying and oppressive in some games, but it's really just about the value that this guy represents. And that's what makes Lom Pyke so strong. Tech is part of a banned combo in the game, and there is a reason why. Now, I think Tech is very, very powerful. I do think DJ was the right one to ban when it comes to Tech DJ. But honestly, it's just, again, with Tech, this guy just represents so much. It just represents so much in so many games. And in fact, a lot of decks were just kind of slotting this in as a one-of for a long time. This 3-cost ground unit in Heroism, 2/5. Each friendly resource gains Smuggle, and the Smuggle cost is equal to that card's cost plus 2, and its aspect icons. And then it's got Smuggle for 4 in Heroism. This card is incredible. We see less of it now than we used to, but it's still, I think, worth mentioning. This is another one that I think could be on the borderline list in at least today's meta, where Tech is value. It is just pure value. You play this in the late game, and suddenly your entire resource bar is now a playable hand. And realistically, when you're at that point, when you're deploying Tech, you probably can start deploying anything from your resource pile for the most part. And that's what makes Tech so powerful. He just makes a second hand for you. All the cards that weren't great in that spot now are a toolbox for you. And not only that, but he also can do the exact same thing for himself, like put him in the resource pile when he's bad and then smuggle him out when the game goes that long to where you can actually take advantage of him. That's the strength of Tech. Again, it all comes down to Smuggle. Of course, you still have that combo that it used to be a part of with DJ, which was absolutely incredible, but the Tech itself is still one of the portions of the combo that I think is just in general more valuable, less, more focused on the combo, more just if I play Tech, I can get a ton of value out of this card. And lastly, we've got no glory only results. This is my pick for the second most powerful rare in the game. 5-cost event in Vigilance Villainy. Take control of a non-leader unit and then defeat it. Very straightforward, very unassuming, but extremely powerful. The strength of this card is immense. This is one of those cards where, because of its printing, you now have like hard control decks or more controlling decks actually be a lot more viable than they could have, or that they were in the past. Things like Chewbacca or TIE Phantom, which were absolutely decimating to control decks in the past. Now people are playing the full 3 of main deck No Glory, not just because of those, but now it actually has an answer main deck that is consistently playing. If you think about cards like TIE Phantom or Chewbacca, that are in the game, and there wasn't a no glory only results, there would be very few ways to deal with it. People would have to be playing main deck entrenched or like perilous position, which they were in the past, to deal with those cards, which they're not horrible cards by any means. It just wasn't a solid answer for the permanency of the game. But it's not just those cards that the controlling decks have to or can deal with now. It's also cards like K2SO, Ruthless Raider, Super Laser Technician, cards that, like, okay, no glory in the results. That's not really a great card up against, my, or Vanquish. That's not really that great of a card up against my control matchup. No glory suddenly is, make your opponent lose a resource, you gain a resource now, is kind of how that can work. I mean, there is so many different versatile parts about no glory only results that it becomes one of the control's main weapons up against most decks. It is an incredible card and definitely my pick for the second most powerful. But honestly, guys, as I was scrolling through the list, things like Craving Power kind of came to mind. I already mentioned Adi Galea. There were a lot of different cards here that I'm like, is this good enough? Victor Leader is another example. IG-2000, if Jango Fett was still here, that would definitely be an option. Trench Run these days is actually quite powerful. There are a lot of them that I felt like you could definitely make an argument. I think the one that I was closest to putting on the list, outside of obviously the ones that were on there already, and it would have to kind of be pretty close, but I was pretty tempted to put Wrecker on the list. And actually the other card that I was thinking of was right beneath it, Miggs Mayfeld. Wrecker I decided to omit just because Wrecker isn't really played without ECL. It's kind of like a 2-card combo, whereas like every other card on this list isn't really a 2-card combo. Like, yes, some of them want other cards on the board to make them more powerful, but it's not like, oh, I need ECL or I need this specific card to be able to make it work. Miggs Mayfeld also I was tempted to put, but it's like really only for, I mean, I guess both Kylo Rens, but Kylo Ren Tarkin Town, it is a critical component and it does dominate the game. And so I think you can make a serious argument because of how oppressive it is in certain matchups. But again, there are a lot of different rares in the game. I mean, you could put Triple Dark Raid on here if you were to include banned cards, right? That's why I didn't put Triple Dark Raid on the list, for me at least. DJ's a legendary, so that wouldn't have come up anyways. There were not a lot from set 1 that honestly I was considering. I mean, you could talk about Han Solo, Spark of Rebellion, Fett's Fire Spray, all options that I think I would have considered in the past. Fett's Fire Spray's gotten a lot weaker these days. Han, really only a Quinlan style card. But I mean, there are, like I said, lots of rares, lots of them that are very close towards that top 10, but not a ton that are like, okay, these are number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever it is. The top 5, I think, is very clear. And then after that, it gets very, very muddled. Very, very muddled. Cards like Hotshot Blaster, cards like No Glory, those are like clear all-stars of the entire format. After that, you're like, yep, that's a really good curve. That's kind of how I think about rares. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thanks so much, everyone, and I'll see you all for the next one.